Alright guys, first things first, thanks for clicking on the video. This is my first video where I'm actually going to go out for a ride. I've just slapped a GoPro on my helmet in probably the not best spot, but it is what it is. I also apologize if this mic is distorting, which I will find out when I go to edit this video, I suppose. So I'm going to take you for a bit of a walk around and a bit of a ride on one of my bikes today. This is a 1986 Honda VFR. In the US it was called an Interceptor. I think they still actually use that name over there for the new ones. This was the first year of the VFRs. This particular example has, oh gosh, I can't even quite remember now, 72,000 kilometers on it. I've owned the bike for about a year and a half. I'll walk you through some bits of the bike and then we'll go for a ride. If you're unfamiliar with the VFR, this was the replacement for the VF series, which was plagued with some mechanical issues. So when they brought these VFRs out, they gained a good reputation for being incredibly reliable, and a lot of that comes down to these puppies right here, the gear-driven cams. Not only are they much more reliable than what was used on the old VFs, they provide a really lovely soundtrack against the V4. So I'll walk you through some of the stuff I've done on the bike. It's far from a perfect bike, as you'll see shortly. When I got it, the seat needed to be retrimmed, and I've actually just got round to doing that. So nice new trim there. Obviously cleaned up a lot of the rubbers and plastics, replaced the little bouncers there. New chain and sprockets. I've done some small cosmetic things. This is a new screen that's come over from Japan. It's an MRA one, but I've just put a Honda sticker over the front because I like the look of that Honda sticker. Some small cosmetic bits around, not too much. What I did do a couple of weeks ago was drop the bloody thing there, which is still a thorn in my side and still a dent in my tank. That's the next thing to get fixed. I would say that there are very few things quite as embarrassing as a static drop. Luckily this one was in my backyard, so no one got to laugh at me except myself. Anyway, let's go for a ride. These V4s, early V4s, they always sound a little tappety on videos to me, and I'm sure that will be the case here, but alright, off we go. So I guess I'll start off giving you a little bit of a bike history for me, just tell you how I got here. Living in Australia, we have to start on something called a LAMS approved bike, which is a learner system, usually limited to something that's about 300 cc's, 400 cc's. I think you can get them up to 600, but they're quite a heavy bike. My LAMS bike of choice was a Ninja 300. A lot of us end up on that. And after my time on my little 300, I made one of the worst choices of my riding life and bought a Honda Blackbird. So I went from a learner bike to what was considered at one point the fastest production bike you could buy. Don't do that. Was looking for an RC36 VFR. This is an RC24, and I had been seeing this bike sort of in the classifieds for a while and just thought, I'll do my due diligence, I'll go check it out. I'd ridden a couple of Triumph triples at that point, and got on this bike and just fell in love with it. it's pretty much the perfect fit for me. You know, I'm gosh, how old am I? I'm 37. So I'm not really all about going mental in the twisties and straight line speed. I want a bike that does a little bit of everything, does it with a little class, a little character, and you know, just feels special. And the minute I got on this bike, that's exactly what I felt. So this is a 750 V4 with gear driven cams, and I don't know if you can hear it, but those last two, V4 with gear driven cams, are a magical combination. It gives this bike a really unique, throaty sort of roar with almost a supercharged overtone. The funny thing is, this bike obviously has the stock exhaust on it. It's pretty much all engine noise. I remember when I was riding home, my wife was behind me, and I got out of the car. I'm like, "Did you hear that noise that it makes?" And she's like, "I didn't hear anything." So I think the sounds are mostly for the person riding it or people in close proximity, unless you put an exhaust on it. I don't know. I've thought about it with this one, but I really do like the keeping things original. So the sound is one thing that I fell in love with. The overall look of the bike I do quite like. I think the RC36 is probably a better looking bike. And then, in my opinion, the two that sort of followed that didn't do a whole lot for me. And then, funny enough, the newer VFR I actually quite like. It gets a bit of a bad rap, but I quite like it. I think it's a good looking bike. But yeah, this bike just fits me really well. It fits what I want to do. It does everything I need to do, and it does it on historic registration. So if you are unfamiliar with the historic registration system in your state, or if your country has one, that's cool. But here in New South Wales, if you have a vehicle that is 30 years or older, it is eligible for historic registration, which essentially means, I'm going to go right here, essentially means that to insure and register this bike cost me $46 a year. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You obviously have to be a member of a club. I'm a member of the Vintage Honda Club, and that cost me about $50 a year as well. So yeah, all told, this bike registration and insurance costs is about $100, which is great. There are obviously catches to that. You're meant to only ride these 60 days out of the year, and you have to ride with a little logbook. But for most people, that's not going to be an issue. I actually own a couple of historically registered bikes, so for me, it's definitely not an issue. And yeah, it's great. So, when this bike came out in 1986, like I said, it was the first of the replacements for the VF series. I actually have one of the advertisements from when this came out, and it's such a space age ad. I mean, the thing's like shooting through stars, and it's next to a Porsche 911, and you know, this was really considered quite an advanced bike when it came out, which here we are, you know, what, 32 years later, is such an unusual concept, because it doesn't even have a fuel gauge. You know, I know a lot of modern sports bikes don't have a fuel gauge. My mate's R6 doesn't. But it's, you know, for a bike that was really a sports tourer, you know, I mean, I think in the first couple of years they tried to really pin it as a sport bike, but it's not. It's a sports tourer. To not have something like a fuel gauge or a clock was a bit of an omission. I think they fixed that up in 87 or 88 and gave it both a fuel gauge and a clock. The rest of us just have to sort of guess. It's got a fuel light. Fuel light doesn't come on until you're well into the reserve tank, so not sure what good that is. The earlier VFRs like this one also had a 16-inch front wheel instead of a 17-inch. The 16-inch front wheel, you don't see many of them anymore, and you really only think about it when you're trying to buy tires and have maybe 3 options. But I do notice handling is quite yes, handling is quite how should we put it, twitchy. You do notice that after a while. Performance on a bike like this, you know, it's actually quite good. A lot of people look at it and think it's going to be pretty slow, but I would say that it's on par with some 600s. It's not going to keep up with something like an R6, but it will keep up with most 600s. It's a lot more torquey than your average 600. The power band is very nice and linear. It pulls all the way till about 10,000, and then finally sort of gives up the goat there. Oh my gosh, I have to scratch my nose. Oh yeah, so good. So the power is great. The power doesn't feel dated. What does feel dated is the braking, and what does feel really dated is the suspension. This does have an adjustable rear shock, which was pretty advanced in 1986, but in 2018 the suspension on this bike is just comical. It does have an anti-dive system on the front suspension. I could not tell you what on earth that does, if anything. The fork seals have been replaced, so it is functioning as it was meant to. But yeah, you treat it like a sport bike, you're going to be a little bummed. Treat it like a sport tourer and you're going to love it. Oh my goodness. It's getting so damn hot here in Sydney. It's springtime right now, but you would not guess it. The other day it was 40 degrees. What on earth is going on? Yesterday it was 20 degrees. I have no idea. If you're thinking about an RC36 as well, it's the same great build quality. I would actually, you know what? I would actually say that the RC36 is probably a slightly better build quality. And even if you're looking at an RC24, it's very tempting to get the first year of something, because then you can say, oh, yep, I got the, you know, it's the first year, sounds special. But in this case, the first year didn't have the fuel gauge, it didn't have a clock, it did have the smaller front wheel. The gear cam tension is also on an 86 and I believe 87. Also had an issue that the later models didn't have. The tensioning springs tend to loosen and you get a little bit of clacking noise, I guess you'd call it, from the gears. It's not a deal breaker. This one does have it a little bit. It can be addressed if it's really bad. For the most part, it's not a big deal. It just doesn't sound as good. This bike, oh, big bump. This bike coming from 1986 obviously does not have ABS. I can't say that I have ever missed having ABS on this bike. The brakes are good enough to stop it. You're not gonna break any stopping distance records, obviously. There is 2 discs up front, 1 in the back, pretty standard. It'll stop it between the 2 of them. The rear one, as you would imagine, not spectacular. What do we have up ahead here? What a lot of guys would do to to these is they'll replace the brake lines with braided lines. Apparently that does make a bit of a difference. These brakes are a little spongy sometimes at the end of a long ride if you really step on them. But I've never had an issue. I've never locked up the front. This is my first bike without ABS, and I honestly, I think it's good on your first bike and when you're a new rider to have that ABS, just because it will give you the that confidence, I guess. I had it on my Ninja, and I think I hit the ABS once. Scared the shit out of me. It says 4 carburetors. When they're in sync and singing, it's sounds lovely. I just had the had all the carbies synced up on this not too long ago by the good guys down at Lloyd Penn in Artarmon. If you have a Japanese bike that you want someone to take care of for you, take it to Lloyd. These guys are awesome. They know what they're doing. You know, this is not a common bike, and they know everything about it. So there's I don't think I'll ever take it anywhere else. Things to look out for if you are going to buy a VFR RC24. Number 1, are the fairings in good condition? It's very hard to find fairings for these bikes. If you search, if you search VFR750, you will find a ton of stuff for the RC36 and not much for this. So it's really important that when you buy one, as much of the components are in good nick as possible. Try and find one that's got a good service history from someone who's kept it really well, like this one is. It will make a massive difference. I do have a seat cowl for this bike. I don't have it on right now because it's a lot of there's a lot of cracking around the bolts. So when I put it on, it does tend to, I don't know, it cracks a little further. That piece needs some reinforcing. I've done it with plastics and a little fiberglass, but it needs more refining than that. If you can, get the rear wheel off the ground and check the rear bearings for side-to-side play. That's another thing that these tend to have an issue with. Take your time and get under the fairings, like check behind, check and see all the hoses and cables and all that. Obviously it's not expensive to replace hoses and cables, but the condition of them will tell you how well the bike has been looked after. What could you expect to pay for one of these? I paid $4,500 for this one, which a lot of you will probably laugh at, because it's a lot of money for a bike from 1986 with 70, well, I think it had 68,000 Ks on it when I got it. It is a lot of money. I've seen these advertised, let's just say in running condition only. I've seen them starting at around $1,500 for one that is just running but not much else. And going up to, yeah, probably around 4,500, 5K, right around there. I think you're not going to have to pay a whole lot more than 5,000 or maybe 5,500 for someone that's restored one. These aren't really a bike that's getting restored right now though. Why am I in the right-hand turn lane? This is, it's sort of on the cusp there, you know. People like this bike, they remember this bike. It's old, but it's not that old. So I don't think I've ever seen one that's been restored. This one, as I said, it's had some bits and pieces done, but not a whole lot. So yeah, you're looking anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000. Crossing, crossing, crossing. That guy, he's a crossing. Why are you doing that? It is inconceivable to me how many people don't know how to use roundabouts correctly. I mean, I would understand if you're in America or something, where the roundabout is like, some cities, it's like seeing a hen's tooth. But here in Australia, they're like every 5 freaking meters. How do you not know how to use this and drive? Goodness gracious. Oh, this is another one. Wonder who's going to stop here and give way when they don't have to. Yep, well done. So that's that, guys. 1986 Honda VFR 750. Get one in your life. My next video will be about my oh hello, my little Yamaha Wild one, which I freaking love.